Hey, this is Mark, and this is episode 35 of the Why Are We Still Doing This podcast. At the beginning of this month, my family and I went on our very first cruise. Before that, seeing James Taylor on the 4th of July at Tanglewood in Lenox, Massachusetts was the whitest thing I'd ever done in my life. Cruises never seemed to grab my attention, especially the ones that never really went to an island. The ones that just sailed the entire time, I felt like I could do everything on the ship on land and not be on a floating toilet in the middle of the ocean. But to be totally honest, I absolutely loved it. I loved getting multiple strawberry daiquiris a day and actively trying to make it mathematically possible that my drink package was worth purchasing. I loved floating around on a tube in what was without a doubt the clearest water I've ever been in. It was too nice. I was like, I can't pee in this water. All my life I've been used to the muddy waters of the Jersey Shore, Virginia Beach, the icy waters of Maine, and some parts of Florida. I don't think I can go back. It's like slumming it up at a Red Roof Inn all your life and being upgraded to the Plaza Hotel with a complimentary limousine and cheese pizza. We were like country mice in a big city. Nothing wrong with the Jersey Shore. Big waves, great for boogie boarding. But if you want a day to just float around the ocean on an inflatable with unlimited fancy drinks in the calmest, clearest water you've ever dipped your toes in, then a cruise like this is for you. I am not sponsored by any cruise line, even though right now that's how it sounds. Now, I love the beach, but the one thing I can't stand when going to a beach is people playing music at the beach. I'm a musician. I have a bachelor's degree in music. Music has been a part of my life since I was a teenager. But when I go to the beach, all I want to hear are usually three things: the crashing of the waves, the seagulls, and, if you've ever been to the Jersey Shore, the guy selling ice cream up and down the beach all day. I have enough going on in my head that when I go to the beach, I just want silence. And reggaeton is the very last thing I want to hear. I don't even want to hear music I enjoy. I just want to hear the sounds of the beach. Just close my eyes and listen to the earth, as crunchy as that sounds. But of course, someone showed up at the nicest beach on the island with a Bluetooth speaker and was playing everything and anything with the N-word or really explicit stuff. Anyway, if you have the means, splurge for the room with a balcony on a cruise ship, especially if you are a family of 4. That 56 to 70 square feet may mean the difference in your family making memories or making bloodshed. Also, it gives you an idea as to where the hell you are sometimes. If you have a cavernous interior room, you have no window, no view to the outside world. But with a balcony and a window, you can see when you've reached your destination, or you can take a glimpse into the complete darkness that is the ocean once the sun goes down. And that is an incredibly eye-opening thing, just how freaking dark the ocean is. I remember waking up after the first night of sailing, looking out our bedroom window, and seeing not the private island, but a smaller adjacent island that the cruise ship line is currently working on. Unfortunately, the island was on the other side of the ship, but whatever. Then, 2 days later, I awoke, looked out my window from my bed all the way across the room and saw the city of Nassau. Nassau was interesting, but it was definitely a lesson for my children in saying no thank you. I said to my son and daughter, if someone comes up to you on the street and offers you something for free or tries to give you something, do not take it. It is not free. We went to the infamous straw market, a place I'll probably never step foot into again. Literally a giant barn with 75% of the booths having the exact same stuff. Generic Bahamas shirts, necklaces, and, quote, handmade items. My son was looking for a seashell necklace, which are a dime a dozen in that place, and he ended up haggling a woman for about $15 down to about $10. So this was also a great place to practice negotiation. However, to my son, I think he felt that he could haggle anywhere for the remainder of the trip, including an ice cream cart at Walt Disney World. My wife purchased 2 supposedly handmade bowls from this market, each as a gift for our mothers. When we returned with them, we noticed that they were wrapped in newspaper that just so happened to be the obituary section of the local paper. And my first thought was, what voodoo is attached to these bowls? Do we need some sort of cleansing now? Overall, Nassau was meh. We didn't do any excursions, not just in Nassau, but on the trip in general, as a lot of them that we had looked into and heard about, they were just very time-consuming. We looked into a dolphin excursion for our daughter because she's been in love with dolphins since she was 6 years old. But when we looked into the details of it, it was like a 45-minute boat ride each way with a total time of like 4 hours, and you get roughly 15 minutes of that time with the actual dolphins. You're only in Nassau from like 7:30 a.m. till 2:30 p.m. And it was like $180 a person. There was another excursion that we looked into that looked really fun, but again was super expensive. And that was feeding wild pigs. And upon looking into it, the very first TikTok I saw with this experience was a pig having what looked like explosive diarrhea in crystal blue water, with a worker not too far behind with a pool net picking up after this hungry hog. And from what I heard, it was similar to the dolphin experience where you get on this rickety boat and have to travel far, but there's free drinks. Free drinks cures everything on vacation, right? One experience my family and I had aboard the cruise that I will never be able to unsee is something that I don't think a lot of people would be able to recover from. It's a given that on a cruise there will be a lot of germs. There's a lot of people who think that because their grandparents survived diphtheria, they'll be okay and don't need to wash their hands. And I'm sure a good portion of them are on these cruises every single day. One morning as we walked into the buffet, we passed through the double doors and veered left toward the hand washing station because we're doing our part. When suddenly we looked down as something caught our eye and saw a giant, human-sized turd just chilling, greeting hungry cruise goers as they entered for their first gorging of the day. And about 2 feet behind it was a giant poop smear. A turd and a smear. Worst of both worlds, I guess. I don't know if that smear was a turd that someone then landed on with their size 12 Tommy Bahama flip-flop. But regardless, this was a human poop on the floor of the room where we ate most of the food we consumed on this cruise. And this was not a baby-sized poop. This was a poop that came from someone who maybe needed a little more fiber in their diet. How did it get there? Was it even real? Was it a brownie that someone didn't care for and decided to have a fun, somewhat harmless prank with? Let's say, in fact, this was a real poop. Whoever it was definitely left the scene of the crime, for one. Two, I don't think they alerted anyone about it, which I'll get into in a second. Three, when you see a situation like this, you know it was a situation where it was like, okay, this is happening and there's nothing that person can do about it. Everyone has had that bathroom emergency that's basically like, there's nothing I can do to stop this. This is happening right now. And that's most likely what happened here. Now, as soon as we saw it, we walked around it, obviously, and washed our hands. But then we all just kind of stood there in shock, to be honest. If you're a Seinfeld fan, you know the episode where Jerry goes to his girlfriend's father's restaurant, and he witnesses his girlfriend's father emerge from the stall, give himself a look in the mirror, proclaim to Jerry that he's going to, quote, personally prepare his dinner that evening, zip up his fly, and walk out of the bathroom without washing his hands. And in that moment, Jerry looks at the door, looks at the sink, then looks at the stall, and stands there in a state of shock. And that's what happened to us. We literally just stood there waiting for someone to quickly remove said stool from the entrance of the eatery. In that moment, it felt like one of those pharmaceutical commercials where there's a woman on a busy New York City street and she's staring straight into the camera, and all around her are people walking past her, but the speed of those people is sped up like 5 times. That's how it felt. There were people all around us filling up their plates with bacon, sausage, and other things that would have their stomach making noises in about 3 hours, completely oblivious to the fact a major biohazard was just a stone's throw away. We waited. My wife said, "Should I say something to that worker? Because I don't think she understands the severity of this situation." Just as she is about to go and speak to her, I see that particular worker come around the corner with a dustpan and a broom. And I said, there's no fucking way she's just brushing this turd onto a dustpan and calling it a day. Luckily, she didn't. A yellow wet floor cone was put in the breezeway, and while there was no wet floor, I don't think a beware of human turd cone is something that cruise ships or pretty much any business keep on hand. But after what seemed like standing in this entrance to the buffet forever, we decided to move on and get something to eat, as at this point it seemed like someone was at least in position to corral this disaster. If this was me in this situation, as a staff member of this cruise, I would have been frantically yelling at everyone who was trying to make their way into the buffet. Then again, I'm sure they want staff to remain calm and not cause a scene. But on the other hand, when there's literally shit on the floor, you want to make sure no one is stepping in it or slipping in it. Imagine someone walks in and slips on it. Someone who is 6'3", 350 pounds, and has zero core strength, then lands on it. Then that person shits themselves and just makes the situation 20 times worse. And again, part of it was the response from the staff. There was one person who seemed to be attending to this, and there seemed like there was no urgency in keeping hungry cruisers at bay. I don't know how a response team was notified of the scene. No one had a radio on or a walkie-talkie. Like, if Old Navy employees can walkie-talkie their staff to open a fitting room, can't we get crew staff a walkie for when someone paints the floor brown? Maybe there's a code like 2319. We have a 2319. I remember taking my daughter to a Six Flags park when she was young, being in the water park, and suddenly seeing a poop just casually floating about 5 feet away from her in the water. I yelled to the lifeguard, "Hey!" and pointed at it. He quickly yelled over to his colleague, threw up the X sign like when there's a catastrophic injury in professional wrestling, and blew his whistle aggressively to get everyone out of the pool. By the time we finished our breakfast, we walked back to the scene of the crime, which was far away from where we chose to dine, as the buffet is massive. But we did smell a lot of bleach, so at least they were thoroughly cleaning it at this point. However, there must have been so many people who walked through that area and now had poop all over their flip-flops. Not only did most of them probably not wash their hands before entering the buffet, but now they had poop on their shoes. Literally all 4 ends of their limbs are covered in poop. Kind of sounds like some low-budget movie monster. And with that kind of stuff being tracked around constantly, I really wish that there wasn't carpet everywhere you went on a cruise ship. But more so in the rooms. There's carpet everywhere. And I can't imagine how much it is deep cleaned with a carpet shampooer. Probably never. It harkens back to the motels I spent many summers in when vacationing in Lake George, New York. How many mildewy carpets our bare feet trampled through as children. The cabins on the ship were all carpeted, similar to a lot of Disney resorts years ago, but have now switched to laminate flooring. The buffet area had a couple entrances, one on each end, and at those points there were hand-washing stations. Now, as you can imagine, not every cruiser passing through is going to stop and washy-washy. Most didn't. Most probably just came from the casino where they were frantically pressing greasy buttons on a slot machine. And from what I know, on a lot of cruise lines, they force you to wash your hands. There's literally someone standing at the sink who will deny you from touching any set of tongs if you don't wash. No buffet for you. Now, on our cruise, that was not the case. Hand washing was encouraged, but not mandatory. There was, however, some very lively entertainment near the wash stations, including 2 crew members, one with a guitar, performing a very lively cover of "You Gotta Wash Your Hands" to the tune of the Beatles classic "I Want to Hold Your Hand." After the cruise, we spent 3 days at Walt Disney World because I cannot go to Florida and not go to Disney World, especially when we were so close to it. We got into the Disney bubble super early on Thursday, roughly around 9 in the morning. We hauled ass to get off the cruise ship once we were able to. Pro tip, carry your own luggage off the cruise ship. It may be more manpower to do so, but you won't have to wait around for someone to bring you your bags for what seems like ever. We were incredibly lucky that no one in our family fell ill during the cruise, either with COVID, which was sure to be floating around the buffet and the pools, or some ungodly diarrhea that would have held us up in our room for a large portion of the day. But it wasn't until our second day at Walt Disney World that our luck would run out. We were enjoying our very first visit to Magic Kingdom during Mickey's Not-So-Scary Halloween Party, which is what they call a hard ticket event, and they close the park early to regular guests, and only those who have a ticket for the event are allowed to stay. The second attraction we visited was the Haunted Mansion, which is easily in the top 5 of my favorite all-time Disney attractions. As soon as we stepped foot out of the mansion, I almost stopped dead, no pun intended, in my tracks. It was like someone pushed the handle of a screwdriver into the area to the right of my belly button and my groin. "Oh," I said. We walked a few more feet, and I looked at my wife and I said, "I think I'm going to shit my pants." And that was the one day of the year that God chose to give me explosive diarrhea. And it just so happened to be in my favorite and most magical place on earth. This was one of the most comical experiences of my life. Throughout the course of my almost 10 hours of theme park time, there were numerous instances where I thought, this is it. I am going to have a bathroom emergency, and there is nothing within my power that I can do to stop it. I ended up having to run to the nearest bathroom 6 times in order to avoid having to shut down an entire attraction due to a biohazard. At one point, my entire family was in line for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, a small but fast roller coaster with lots of twists and turns. We were roughly 2 minutes away from boarding when I started looking around for an exit because I really thought it was going to happen. I remember standing, waiting for the next train to come through. We were the next people to board. I thought, this is it. There's nothing I can do to stop this. And I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to relax and hope that it would pass. And miraculously, it did. If you had taken a photo of me in that moment with a hypersensitive camera, you may have seen the hand of an angel on my shoulder, guiding me through what could have been a haunting experience for myself and everyone around me. This also happened on Space Mountain. Making it almost to the end of the line, feeling this rush of adrenaline, and having to force my body in the most meditative, zen-like state that I've probably ever had in order to fend off this aggressive attack. The entire time, all I could think was, this will be a story to tell for generations. Not sure if everyone will want to hear it, especially at something like Christmas dinner, but I know that it is one I will forever look back on and laugh at. It was by far the grossest I've ever been in a theme park. It was incredibly humid, even late into the evening. Combined with the absurd amount of bathroom trips and perspiration-soaked shirts and shorts, I could have been inducted into the Theme Park Stank Hall of Fame. And in thinking about how gross I was, I again thought about someone like me, yet 300 pounds and double the amount of sweat and stink, climbing into a bed at their Disney resort, possibly the same bed that I am sleeping in, or even worse, getting directly off the resort bus and immediately diving into the same resort pool I'm swimming in. I remember our last day on the cruise ship, my son wanted to go swimming. At this point in the night, the water slides were closed, and all that was open was the pools. We wandered out of the back of the ship where one of the pools was, and it was fairly crowded. You really couldn't do anything fun, I guess, in the pool at that time because there was way too many people. And this was the first time we kind of encountered this on the ship, with the pool being too crowded. And it was the first time I've ever been in a public pool and just felt kind of gross. If the people are spread out enough, I'm totally cool. But this was one of those things where you're in the pool, just existing, not moving much at all, and you're bumping into people. And this is where I felt like ground zero was for me. This is where I feel like I picked up whatever hilariously impacted my day at Magic Kingdom during Mickey's not-so-scary Halloween party and turned it, for me, into a nightmare on Main Street, USA. All those people in that little pool, a small percentage of them who may have flip-flopped through a chocolate surprise on the way to the buffet, or maybe just didn't washy-washy at all the entire cruise. Did I mention how the whole cruise ship started for me? Before the cruise ship even started, we ended up flying into Orlando, taking a lift to Port Canaveral, and staying in a hotel right near the port the night before, just so we didn't take any chances with trying to fly in the morning of the cruise, the flight getting delayed, and we missed the boat. Long story short, the morning of the cruise, we were eating breakfast in the hotel breakfast area. I went to the bathroom, and as I finished up and was washing my hands,
I'm doing my part.
An older man walked out of the stall and walked right out of the bathroom. Not a hand was washed. I don't know how I didn't fly into a rage at that moment. I walked out and saw him head straight to the breakfast buffet. Going into this trip, I knew that I was going to be eating at a buffet where a lot of people were not washing their hands. But I didn't know that was going to start even before I got on the cruise. I was so mad at this guy. Luckily, I was done eating and not going back up to the buffet, but if I was, I so wanted to create a scene. I so wanted to do one of those cinematic moments where I just get everyone's attention, like, excuse me, everyone. I'd just like to let everybody know that this grown man didn't wash his hands after using the toilet. And then it would turn into one of those Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm moments where he yells back, I have a serious allergy to hotel soaps. And then everyone looks at me and is like, yeah, what's wrong with you? How could you be so cruel? And then I'm the bad guy, somehow. My other theory as to how I ended up running to the restroom at Magic Kingdom so often was that I had a chicken Caesar salad that afternoon. It wasn't my favorite, mostly for the fact that the chicken was cold, but I kept thinking about all the lettuce parasites and diarrhea that has been going on lately, and thought that might be why. But it didn't make sense, though, because the 4 nights previous to that, I had a Caesar salad every night with dinner on the cruise ship. And those salads were delicious. But again, we'd love to try and pinpoint where and how we got sick. I've talked about this many times in the past on the show, about how we obsessed with where we picked up COVID if we ended up getting it. Well, it was probably that movie we went to see, and that lady who was 5 rows in front of us was coughing the whole time. Cruise ships are the ultimate place to indulge in addictions. Drinking, eating, gambling, smoking. Maybe the smoking part because you can smoke in the casinos. But one of the more eye-opening parts of the cruise, and I'm talking figuratively and not literally as with the buffet poop, had to do with the staff, their story, and their employment with the company. The vast majority of the staff on the ship were from the Philippines. And I think that is very much across the board on a lot of cruise ships. But every single one of them were super friendly, super attentive, and just super hard workers. We had exceptional service with everyone we encountered. In terms of meals, if you're not familiar, usually on a cruise ship you get a sit-down dinner every evening in the same, quote, restaurant with the same server. Our server was a guy named Ronald who was just amazing. Gave us an extra entree once, gave us a couple extra desserts, was great with the kids. But by the fourth night of the cruise, half of us just wanted to give him a hug. Each night of the cruise, Ronald told us a little more about his life and his family, and the reality of his everyday life. We didn't know if most of the staff lived on the private island or somewhere else, but come to find out that most of the staff lived on the ship for about 8 months of the year, while his family was back in the home in the Philippines. He said that during his time off the ship, he found it difficult to even see his children during that time because saying goodbye and going back to work on the ship was so difficult for him. You're just stuffing your fat face all damn day at the buffet, drinking copious amounts of alcohol. Then you go to dinner where you sit down and stuff your fat face even more. And it's just way too much food. For example, my son ate off the kids' menu at the sit-down dinner where you pick one appetizer, one entree, and one dessert. One of the nights, the appetizer for my son was a mini pizza with French fries, which could have easily been the main meal. For his entree, he ordered the cheeseburger, again with fries. He ate all the pizza that by the time the burger came out, he said, Dad, I'm full, but can you eat some of it so it looks like I ate it? And I think the reason he said this to me was probably on the third night of our cruise, Ronald had told us a story about how when he was a child and how there were 6 of them in the family, how rare it was that they had steak for dinner. And if they did have steak for dinner, it was probably an 8-ounce piece for the entire family that was cut up into very small squares, a small square for each child mixed in with vegetables, because that's all they could afford. And here he is as an adult serving a kid a pizza and French fries as an appetizer. Way more food than he needs. And let me just say how much I do not like appetizers as an adult and as a parent. As a parent, I hate appetizers because when you order appetizers with small children, they eat the mozzarella sticks and pound it with their chocolate milk and take one bite of their main meal and say, I'm full. My wife would tell me the rage in her father's eyes when she was a little girl and she would consume her large chocolate milk before the meal came at the restaurant and would eat maybe a third of the meal because she was full from the chocolate milk. As an adult, I hate appetizers because I don't eat my entree if appetizers come. I'm not a big eater. I will never be the guy who takes over the dinner with like 8 people and orders, quote, a couple apps for the table. Yeah, let's do a couple appetizers for the table. No. Stop. Because I always get stuck paying way more than I should in those situations. The bill is never evenly split when someone orders apps for the table. The guy who orders apps for the table should be the one to pay for them. That should be the rule. I don't know what caused me to have this mindset. Like, I don't have some food-related trauma from growing up. I don't know. Anyway, the amount of food at dinner was just too much for some people. And to hear Ronald talk about his upbringing and lack of food when he was a child, how long he is away from his family, and the hours these people are working, I started to feel guilty for even enjoying myself in this environment. Now, I know that a lot of these people are making far more than what they ever could in their home country, but still, the amount of hours they work is unprecedented. Think of it this way. We all buy Nike sneakers. We know they come from factories where people are working long hours for little pay. But we never actually see the working conditions or the sweatshops, quote, where they are working. With a cruise ship, we're literally in the sweatshop. We're actively paying for a product, or in this case a service, while still in the sweatshop. It would be like traveling to Indonesia and getting a fresh pair of Jordan 11s straight out of the hands of someone making $4 an hour. Now, is knowing all of this going to deter me from taking another cruise? Probably not. But I know all of that will be in the back of my head the whole time. But I'm sure it's nothing a handful of strawberry daiquiris won't cure and make me forget about. Anyway. At one point, Ronald had mentioned that when we disembark from the ship, we should receive an email from the cruise line with a survey asking about our experiences. He said that there would be a section regarding the dining and stated something along the lines of, if we gave him a 10 out of 10 for our experience with him, his supervisors would give him a 3-hour break. A 3-hour break. And I didn't want to ask any follow-up questions here. Part of me felt like there was a hidden camera watching his every move, and if he disclosed too much of his life aboard the ship, he'd be shackled to the wall shirtless in the engine room. I didn't want to get into the logistics too much of his work schedule, but you can bet that when we got that post-cruise survey, we 10 out of 10 the out of it, and repeatedly mentioned his name and his excellent service. Ronald had talked about how little outdoor time he's actually had in the past 6 months. I don't remember what it was, but it was something ridiculous like he hadn't been outside since this past spring. What the fuck? We ended up tipping Ronald generously, and you could tell he was super grateful. We tipped our drink waiter as well at the end of the cruise, and our cabin attendant. Again, very appreciative. But Ronald is someone that we couldn't stop talking about and how we felt for him and his family, but also how lucky we are to be able to go on a vacation like this when he could have never dreamed of anything other than poverty growing up. Now, there's a very slight chance that this whole thing could be a clever ruse on us and that Ronald is in fact very well off and this was just an act in order to receive large gratuities. The way my brain works, I cannot help but think that this is the worst case scenario here. A small portion of me thinks Ronald goes back to his lonely room in the bowels of the ship and jumps into his pool of coins like Scrooge McDuck at the opening of DuckTales. Highly unlikely, though. Following our cruise, we made our way over to my favorite place in the world, as I talked about, Walt Disney World. And on the way to our dinner at one of my favorite places on property, my wife said, "Wouldn't it be crazy if Ronald was our waiter tonight?" I said, that would be like an episode of The Twilight Zone. Like, we sit down, he comes around the corner and says, "Nice to see you again." Then our drink waiter appears, the room goes black, and that's all that's left is us and Ronald under a spotlight. A strawberry daiquiri appears in front of me, but instead of strawberry, it's blood. I don't know. Anyway, this is getting a little too dark here, but you get the idea. I will always remember Ronald, and I truly hope the best for him, and that someday he and his family can be together 100% of the time, and maybe one day take a cruise of their own. Wait a minute. No, he would probably hate that. That would be like the last vacation he'd probably want to take. I have no idea what kind of vacation Ronald would take. But my guess is it would probably be much like our time on the island, sitting in the clearest water in a floaty with a fancy drink and hopefully not a Bluetooth speaker in sight. Anyway, thank you for listening. This has been episode 35 of the Why Are We Still Doing This podcast. And if you'd like to write in, you can do so at whyarewestilldoingthispodcast@gmail.com. whyarewestilldoingthispodcast@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com/whyarewestilldoingthis. buymeacoffee.com/whyarewestilldoingthis. And we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody. Bye.